Hey, everybody, how are you? I hope you're all doing well. There was never a Friendsgiving Eve or Friendsgiving when I was a kid. People now go out for Friendsgiving, and I don't know. They made things up just so you could spend money. That's like I always say, Valentine's Day was a brilliant PR move by Hallmark to soak people out of money, chocolates when you're supposed to be dieting, roses that are 30 times more that one night. The thing what you have to do is make believe you're ill that night, and then the next day get the half price cards and the chocolate and all that. But I hope you're all doing well. Friendsgiving, happy Turkey Day to you and yours, Ira. I'm going to see Ira tomorrow, probably. You know, there are things that we have missed out on, and we don't remember them because we're older and we don't give a shit anymore. But I remember I was dating this Brit in the 80s, and they really tried to be American. They really did. And when I got her, she was 10 years in the country. And I'll give you a couple of things in the 80s that were very big because I spent Thanksgiving there. I knew her a week and I was invited. The hell were they thinking, right? Ambrosia salad. That was very big back then. Remember that? All that dessert kind of ambrosia salad. Giblet gravy. That's never served anymore. And cranberry fluff, which was applesauce and whipped cream and all that. And that's the first time I ever had it there at that house. And it was good. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I was talking to her today. And we were talking about the first time I had ever gone there, which was 41 years ago. And it just how dietary needs stop you from making certain things. Cornbread was big back then, and they've replaced it with things. So another reason I think why people ate is because people are stress eaters. And what more stress can you possibly have than a Thanksgiving day with family that you don't see? Now, generally speaking, to me, if you only see someone once a year, it's because you're forced into it. It's not your choice, but you have to. Because anybody that I like, I make sure I see them more than once a year, right? I don't care where they live. Go visit them. So there's a lot of stress involved. When are you getting married, right? Uh, when are you going to finish school? When are you going to buy a house? When are you going to die? You know, it's kind of like, well, that's what you would say to the older person who keeps on breaking your balls. But it's unbelievable. It really is, because Thanksgiving is a day where we are reminded why we don't speak to certain people, why we really like people. Thanksgiving Day is like the cruise ship. You go on a cruise ship. The first seating, you're at the same table with 4 other couples for 7 days or whatever, 5 other couples. You're very quiet the first seating. You're sizing up who you might want to talk to if you want to get out of that table. By the 3rd day, everyone's best friends. By the 5th day, make sure you call me when you have your grandchild over and all that. And they all love each other. And you know what happens? Nothing. You might get one Christmas card. You never see these people again. But why were you you would have swore that, my God, we should have gone on a cruise ship 5 times and we would have had 40 friends for the rest of our lives. It seems like these are the people that were meant for you. No, they were meant for that trip so you wouldn't be bored out of your ass. So we gear ourselves to what we need. Thursday, Thanksgiving, we need aggravation, obviously. But there's nothing wrong with setting boundaries, right? You could say, well, I'm going to come, but I'm going to leave early. And when you get older, if you're a guy, usually you take the leave out of there and I'm going to come early. But you know what I mean. You just, you set boundaries. If someone is talking about politics, no, no. So you get out of there. You don't get into an argument about it because there will be an argument. Make no bones about it. You gravitate toward the people that you have some special camaraderie with. Maybe the people that you see twice a year instead of once a year, right? And you adjust your thinking and you put yourself in a survival mode, but a survival mode with some fun attached because there's no reason you shouldn't have fun. It's your holiday too, right? You shouldn't have to go somewhere if you know that the next day you're going to say, "Phew, got through that." If you have to say got through that, don't go through it. Order in. Everyone has an Uber account, and if you don't have an Uber account, get off your ass and walk there. But why be so miserable on a day that's supposed to be thankful? Right? What are you being thankful for being miserable? No. Now, generally speaking, my Thanksgiving starts off where I'm cursing every curse in the book, and I've made up a few because I'm in an hour and 45 minutes traffic to go to where I usually go. So I'm ready to, I just don't want anything. Leave me alone. Don't come say hello Thanksgiving. Just get the fuck out of my face. I want to go sit and see if I can watch the rest of the football game because I missed most of it in traffic. And then you calm down. You realize you're there for family. And then you realize you're there for family. And then all over again, you get upset. But the upset wanes because you start seeing the stuff being brought out to the table. The turkey, the stuffing, the this, the that. And you truly realize that this is where I'm supposed to be today. So I might get a little banged around, but who cares? It's once a year. And I'll even be nice to the person I can't stand. I'll fool them because if I have negative energy, they're ruining my day. And I'm not giving anybody the energy to ruin my day. If I want to ruin my day, I'll ruin my day. So Ira was nice enough to invite me for dessert tomorrow. And I am going to try to take him up on it. He's a wonderful dude. And he's been going through his own issues. His mother-in-law is ill, and it's hard. But he's grinning and bearing it because that's what we do at our age. Unfortunately, at our age, there are going to be real problems attached. When I was 23, my real problem was, you notice I'm doing this because there was no cell phone. Hey, what's up? Hey, you think they're open tonight? You think there'll be anybody there? Everybody's eating though. I worked one night because Shout opened up Thanksgiving like at 11 p.m. It was packed. You would never believe how many people couldn't wait to get the hell out of where they were. Packed. And it was interesting because, I was a bouncer, so I would hear people talking. I knew a lot of people. They'd come over, happy Thanksgiving, all that. And who couldn't believe I got through this, and my ex-boyfriend was there, and like, I should have stayed home, But it's nice to hear people lamenting because you almost think like, good, thank God they have it worse than me. It's kind of like I always thought God put misfortunate people on this earth to show the fortunate ones that they're fortunate, right? If I never went to a shit Italian restaurant, how could I know that one's good? And that's how I look at it. If you It's like when you buy a car. You go to a car dealership. Oh, well, yeah, yeah, we treat you like family. How about if my family sucks and I can't stand them? You're gonna treat me like them then? You people say things just to say them. They say things to be nice, but sometimes we take it too far. Like, oh, you got to come to my house next week. He's being nice. He don't want you there. He's being nice because that's what you say. How many people go to a wake and say, "Oh my God, I can't. I know what you feel." And 3 hours later, they're dancing like this at a disco. You think they give a shit about that? No, they're not thinking about the wake. They're moving on with their lives because life. The last time I heard, when you're dead a pretty long time. So you might as well have happiness now, and you find happiness everywhere you can. So if you don't have a home and you don't own a home, you rent, be happy where you're renting, right? When the pump breaks and it's 15,000 plumbing bill, you don't gotta worry about it. If you don't have a car, who cares? Take car service. Do what you got to do. It shouldn't ruin your life. If you have an ex-girlfriend who used to at least check in on you, now she doesn't. Hey, Joe, who cares? Good. That's one less person you have to worry about. You have to worry about you. And that's all you can do. That's a full-time job. Like I love when people say, "Oh, I have so much to do." How do you have time to worry about anybody else? Your life is that perfect where you don't have to worry about anything? Or if you're gaslighting, I won't look at myself. I'll solve the world's problems because they're over here and I'm over here. And I don't have to think about my problems if I'm too busy solving yours. Well, a funny thing happens. They end up happy and you're still miserable. So how do we get to the point where we think we can be happy, but we're really going to put it in force? Well, with family, tomorrow, it's stressful. It's stressful for the hostess, right? And you try to do what you can. You bring your bottle of wine, you bring your bottle of cyanide if you don't like someone. And this goes out. My pal just texted me, Dominic, the Korea family. God bless you. And I'm just texting him back now. All right, I texted him back. So, Bambi, how are you? Happy Thanksgiving. So, uh, look, Thanksgiving is rough. It's rough even when your family's perfect, because generally speaking, family days are interesting. I'm good. It's good to see you. Family days are interesting because with family days come family, and usually something will come up. Now, if you're me, I'm the one that brings it up. But people feel they need to vent. And if I'm only seeing you once a year, shit, I'll bring a list. What the hell did I want to say to them for the whole year? Like I was in June, something came up. Oh, I remember they did that. Screw them. I'm going to say it the next time, 5 months when I see them. Well, you know what? my list, it's like Moses carrying the fucking staffs, and I don't miss anything. And it's funny because I feel good, and everybody else is like, I walk out of the rubble like the devil with the burning house. And you ever see like a John Wick figure in all black, building burning, and he's walking out like that? Well, that's kind of how I feel when I leave the in disaster. I'm taking a walk, and it happens. It used to be, yeah. Listen, it's yeah, me too, Bambi. Now it's like, I try not to raise shit anymore. It's just not fun anymore. You need someone to. I'll tell you, part of the fun of Thanksgiving is not knowing what it brings. And then you have African American Friday, Black Friday, where you can do all your shopping. And I love, you know what it's like? It's like when they say there's going to be a snowstorm, 9 million people are at store buying milk, and 8 million of them don't even drink milk. It's just, you have to do it. It's something you have to do, right? You have to be, look, what time is Macy's open till 1800 hours? Well, you're not going anyway. What do you care? You know how many people say, well, I wonder if Macy's open all night? You're not going. What do you care? They just want to be involved. They want to know. So if someone says, Macy's is open, you want to be the one that could say it. And I could care less. I remember when my kid was small and my nieces and nephews used to stay out at my sister's house, my late sister, and where I'm going tomorrow. And they'd all, midnight was, Harry Potter was released. People are walking around. I swear to God, I thought someone flew over me. It was like crazy. It was out in Long Island at the Tangier Mall, not the one in Riverhead, the other joint. And everybody was so excited. My niece would 3 days, like a fucking vampire. She'd read that book. She finished it in like 8 hours. No one slept. I told my ex, my friend, the Brit, and she said to me when I said, "This is ridiculous." I said, "They're ridiculous. What's wrong with them?" And she said to me, she said, and this was like in this is like 2005, I think, or 2003. She goes, "Wait a minute." She goes, "Weren't you at Tower Records at midnight, like when the Beatle anthology was coming out?" She said, "In fact," because she remembers everything, "didn't you tell me that you got to your house about 12:45 a.m. and because you were listening to it in the car, you went into the house at 7 a.m. because you just had to listen to the whole thing in the car. You couldn't even leave the car." She goes, "Well, happy Harry Potter Day." She said that. So I understand when you're excited about something. Now, there could be problems. I'll tell you, if you have a big family gathering, who says, "Guess what? Well, we're having a baby." First of all, I say to the guy, "You're not having anything. She's having the baby, unless there's something that I don't know about." Or who's getting engaged? And then you got the other couple who's been waiting, and the girl takes a shit fit, and that guy's day's ruined. Like, they just started going out yesterday. We're together 8 years. Yeah, I've learned a lot about you. That's why. But it's crazy. Look, when I was dating people, never love anybody. Because if you love them, they can drive you crazy because they know they can. If you don't love them, they're too busy worrying if you're going to leave, that they don't have time to break your balls. They're breaking their own balls. You know what I mean? You're living in their head. And even if you don't really feel that way and you do love them, you got to make sure that they don't think so. That, and that's why I had all my problems. But tomorrow is going to be rough for some people. Some people are alone on Thanksgiving. It should be a day of reflection. It should. What's wrong? Listen, most people have gone out on Thanksgiving. So if you're alone this Thanksgiving, you might have gone, you have plenty of memories of being out at one time or another. And you watch a movie. What do they get? Probably got the honeymooners on, 3,000 of them tomorrow, whatever they do. March of the Wooden Soldiers, whatever the hell it was. I used to watch. I remember Laurel and Hardy. I remember that in the morning. And Make it make the day about you. This Thanksgiving, you don't have to deal with anybody. It's all about you. What's wrong with that? Don't you deserve a day? Make the Thanksgiving thanking whomever it is that you're comfortable in your own skin and you're thankful that you're healthy enough to be here. And if you're with a big family, you can, when you get aggravated, you could wonder about the people that don't and that may feel a little lonely that day. Or maybe people know when to die. People, last night, two people told me I lost my dad. It's like they marked the calendar. Oh, let me ruin the Christmas holiday for my daughter. Let me drop dead now. It's like unbelievable. It's like people know when to die just to fuck you up. And we always like, oh, people always die around the holidays. No, they don't. I know people that die June 1st, May 8th. No, it's just the holidays are here. I know, Joe. Yeah, I don't love I love the holidays because my son's into it. But he got me into it. But I don't give a shit about anything. You know me. Chris, happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Christopher Toro. Yeah, look, I think I don't like it until if you took it away. And then I'd not like it less. But it is all about giving thanks, but it's a universal thanks, and that doesn't have to be with a lot of people. You could sit on Thanksgiving if you're alone. Think about the people you do have in your life. Think about you are lucky. Well, look, would you rather have a great big Thanksgiving and have no one in your life the rest of the year? Or would you rather be almost alone on Thanksgiving, but have a great support group throughout the year? But they just happen to be busy on Thanksgiving and you're not with them, they're at their families. What would you rather have? I'd rather have the year round 364, right? 24/7. If you're Jewish, 24/6. You know what I mean? I'd rather have that. I'm sure, Joe. Well, I've met you. Joe, I see you could do the right thing. You have that personality where you could want to kill someone, but you'll, keep it holstered. I know. That's how I am. As soon as it starts getting too much for me, I'll take a walk outside. I'll make some phone calls. I have a lot of people. I get so many phone calls for Thanksgiving and all that. I got to get, back to people. I swear I get 30 or 40 calls. Mike, how are you? I agree with you totally. No politics, no politics, no polyps. That's the first thing. No politics at Thanksgiving. Absolutely. Because really, if you think of it totally obligatory, every side is screwed up. Some sides might think more, they're all screwed up. So you're better off not dealing with it. And Mike, I pray for you and your family that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, my friend. Michael is a new friend. I found his channel. Like I had said on here, he relaxes me, has a calming influence. His content is brilliant, and he's just a good dude. And check his channel out. Joe Co-Train, who is pretty much my unofficial executor on here. Could you please put his link up? Good guy. And his friend Royce, another great channel. They do the right thing. They are just there to be there for you. And they respect who you are. And that's the key. We all just want to be happy. Like if I were mediating and I went to the Middle East, if I went anywhere trying to solve a war between two guys. I say, you both shut up for 10 minutes. Let me talk. I'll say, I'm going to show you. You say we're so far apart. I'm going to show you for 10 minutes how close we are. You have a kid? Yeah. Do you want the best for them? Yeah. You love them? Yeah. Well, there's three things that we're exactly alike in. Now, your enemy. Do you have a kid? Yeah. Do you like your kid? You love your kid? You want your kid to do better than you? You want the kid to be healthy? Oh, there you go. So you guys have that in common too. So right there, the three of us have all that in common. I'm going to go on for another 100 things. And I'm going to say, now, what are we here for? Because you said we have nothing in common. I just gave you 200 things that we're in common with. That's how I would start it. Mike, this is a perfect place to be because I'm hiding out too. Think I want to stir gravy? No, that's a you see, hiding out from the friends, Mike. I have had that issue. I never had that issue before. Hey, Reed. Royce, thank you, Joe. There's Royce. I'll put Mike up in a second. You got to check their channels out. They're terrific. And they're good people. In fact, let me just. I want to. I'm such a invalid on here. That I'm terrible at maneuvering, and I couldn't find Royce the other night. I had him saved in here. So I'm going to go right now on my YouTube. As I'm on StreamYard now, and just go to the chat. And do it so I don't miss him. I want to be notified. And there is Michael. Wait. Where's Mike's channel? There's Mike's channel. Yeah, thank you, Joe. Yeah, Mike, these two guys are great. I know. Chris, you know what? You don't even mind if they start lying and change the story a little. Like I would say, dude, listen, I know you're going to totally bullshit. Make her 25 and 5'10" and look like Christy Brinkley, not 45. I got you back here. I'll say, yeah, I saw her. I know what you mean. You just, after a while, it's the same shit. It's like where I sat for the World Series game. It's, I know you told me, but yeah, right. Just change it up, Chris. Like, yeah, look, I'm going to say Christy Brinkley hit on you in 1990, and I was there when you were, I got you back. Don't worry. If they say it, look, I got some cred. I would do it just to make, I want to shock the shit out of everybody. So everybody would say, you never told me that. Well, I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to be like a big shot. Yeah, and I had Demi Moore too in the back. I would go crazy with it. I would go crazy. I would have you beating the shit out of Trump one night. I would go crazy. Gotti came to you and asked for advice. By the time I got through with them, they'd all be kissing your ring at that right after dessert. That's what I would do. I would just really go with it. Imagine me going with it. Forget about it. It would be like Tony and Tina's wedding. Tony and Tina's wedding used to be a play where people tell me you slept with Oprah, right? Yeah, right. Sleeping on top of Oprah is different than sleeping with Oprah. But no, I know what you mean. I'll tell you though, for that money, if I had enough juice in me, I still couldn't do it. I got to tell you though, I used to like Oprah's show. I don't watch anything anymore, but no, she was good. I used to like Ellen DeGeneres. I saw Ellen DeGeneres 35 years ago, when she was a comedian. I have to tell you, she was very funny. She was terrific. I saw her in Manhattan, Catch a Rising Star, maybe, and she was really great. Mike, that's funny. His in-laws are outlaws. I might like my in-laws more. I once tried to make it a law, but the law is outlawed. You're funny. Yeah, Mike. I don't know if you have a big family or what, but we're fortunate to have them. I'll tell you when you'd miss it. When we miss it, when it's not there anymore. I have this one guy that I know, and I did a DJ show, Valentine's night, about 16 years ago. I covered for someone. Everybody was dressed. I wasn't. He had this glimmering jacket. He looked like Elton John would borrow his jacket, and he went and got me it, and he fixed my. The above sentence would make a bit more sense if you change the first word from his to if. Oh, if in-laws were outlaws, I might be okay. Yeah, Siri, forget about it. I made Siri have a British voice, the chick, and she started arguing with me because I was making fun of her. I'm always getting these things like I bought something. They'd appreciate my feedback. No, you wouldn't. You'd go out of business if I told you what I really thought. Mike, you'll love this. And people are always trying to screw you, right? And not the right people. I'm on with Siri because not Siri, Sirius Radio, Mike. This is a true story. And I called to renew my car. I think I got it for 6 months in my new car, and it went. Well, we have $149 for the year. No, I'm not real. I'm just calling. I got Apple. I don't need it. Well, hold on. We have like $119 for the year. Nah, I don't really need it. Can you hold on for a second? Well, we have a special $6 a month for the next 6 months. I said, so pretty much you've been trying to fuck me for the last 10 minutes because you could have told me that when I called. She started laughing. She goes, we're being recorded. I said, good. I hope the manager hears it. Maybe you'd have more people and they wouldn't go F yourself and hang up on you. Everyone's trying to screw you. I went into CVS. Mike, I think Mitch might have been there. And they told me my medicine was like $428. I took Vaseline off the shelf. I tossed it to them. I went like this. Let me know when you're done. It's a no medication day for me, Joey. We lost my. Oh, Les, I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry about that, Michael. Yeah. Yeah. Look, in-laws are not supposed to be perfect because they'd be outlaws, like Michael said. When you lose someone dear to you, you really never know the impact, what it's going to have, how you're going to feel. You could imagine you're going to feel terrible, right? But what do? When you lose a parent, you try to think of when you're a kid, when you lost your goldfish. You have no comparison. You know it's going to hurt, but you don't really know until you know. And I have to tell you, when I lost, I lost both sisters. I lost my parents. I had to continually find a new normal. Like you lose someone dear to you. It's like a girlfriend. Say she takes off, right? She breaks your heart. Oh, you think about her every day for the first 3 months. The first time you wake up in the morning, then it's the second time, then it's the third time, then it's once a day, then it's twice. That's what happens. It's terrible though, but it's part of life. Now we grow from it. I really do believe we don't get stronger. I don't believe that because if we got really stronger, that means it wouldn't bother us. So the fourth death, sorry, bye, gotta go. You wouldn't care. We don't get stronger. We understand it more. When you understand the ramifications of something, it still hurts, but there's a reason. Like when someone says it's God's plan. Oh, it's God's plan that a garbage truck ran down a 4-year-old? What plan could that be? Like, you tell me, what is the upside of that? Why do we say that? So we can deal with it. So people still go to church on Sunday or no one would ever go. They'd all be mad at him. So he must know better. Pass the buck. And that's the way it is. We learn from every experience. I'm sure Mikey has a million experiences that he's gone through. Like you said, the mother-in-law, she's supposed to give you a hard time. Listen, since you grew up, you heard about mother-in-law jokes. People make jokes. There's something in reality, you know, but mother-in-laws are mother-in-laws, and they teach you how to love unconditionally, but they teach you a different type of love. They teach you to love someone who you don't necessarily get on with, but the common denominator is you love their daughter. So in turn, I love you. I wouldn't pick you out in a bar. Hey, you want to hang out next week? No, you'll have in-laws that you would never want to go watch a football game and would have never. You could have gone to the bar every night for 10 years and they could have been sitting there and you would have never swapped numbers with them. You're just different people. But within the family context, you're fine. They don't fit your narrative of who you'd want to hang out with. But when you're hanging out with them, it's fine. And the common denominator there is what? Their family. I must have missed that. When someone's thanking Co-Train, he must have said something good. My, my mother invited my 84-year-old aunt to my house tomorrow, and she's bringing two of her friends who are 85 and 89. I'm sure there's going to be a hoot. There's going to be a hoot, and there's going to be loot. If you're that age, the smell in the kitchen is not burning; it's inheritance. Be nice. You never know. But I'm joking. No Med Wednesday. So I think that I did that once with my wife at the time. We walked in. Her mother was old. She goes, "What's that smell?" I said, "Inheritance." Terrible. But we learn how to love people. And it can't always be on our terms. We have to open up to the possibility that everyone isn't wrong all the time. Right? When someone tells us, if 20 people tell us, then you should lose weight for your health, the chances are they didn't all call each other in the morning and say, "Let's break Vinny's balls and make him feel like shit today." No, obviously, I might be wrong when I say, "Wow, I got it, man. This looks good." Right? When people that care about you tell you something, right? The chances are you're wrong. If everybody can't be wrong all the time. If people that don't know each other think something, chances are you're wrong. But how do we find out we're wrong? We got to do it because it's our life. Because it's our life. To Tommaso, yeah, Tommaso is great. I love Tommaso. Joe Scheinbox took me to Tommaso. Believe it or not, that was the first time I had ever been there. Mom, you actually crazy. Yeah, Mike, people are put in front of us for all reasons, and that includes family. My youngest sister died of a drug overdose at 39 years of age about 18 years ago. Partially, I would want her there tomorrow to really scream at her for what she did, but to just give her a hug and say, "I always loved you. You might not have thought so. I just didn't know how to react to you." See, sometimes that's the one I was talking about, 86th Street. Yeah, in fact, not far from where the Chico was killed. Oh, 18th Avenue. Right down the block. Well, was it 18th Avenue? I didn't go to that one then. But you know what was down there? OK Chevrolet, which was Mike Francis. That was Joe Colombo's place. And Mike Francis took that over when Colombo got shot. people are put here for a reason. And I really do believe the reason is to show us. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, my cousin was Anthony Scotto. He lived actually right down the block in Persico on 11th Avenue. And he used to go see him when he was a kid. Yeah. Uh, I just always thought that why not soak it all in? If people are trying to teach us things because we know they're there for that, you know, I would love to share something with you guys. And you know what? No, I'm not, Joe. I'm going to show you something very sad. I'm going to show you something very sad because I trust all you guys. You're my friends. And it means something to me to share it with you guys. This is why you can't take things for granted. Let me move this and turn off my camera. You're going to see the room looks like crap. Oh, wait a second here. Take the visual off. How do I do that? I'm like useless in this. Now I want to show you this. Visual effects. Oh, none. Okay, you see that it's a mess here. But I want to show you this. This is why you cannot. I'm going to tell you a story. My sister Nancy, 54 years of age, about 8 years ago, went to the hospital, wasn't feeling good. They were going to do stents. They found out she needed quadruple bypass. They did the operation. She was fine. She said to the doctor, I had a dream. And the doctor said, you couldn't have. You're on Propanol. You couldn't have dreamt. She goes, don't tell me. I had a dream that my father and grandfather, both deceased, were at this big table negotiating for me for more time. I didn't see God, but they were negotiating to give me more time. She tells all her kids she loves them. About 8 hours later,
I accept all your apologies for everything that I've done. Take me to Hawaii when this is all finished.
Take me to Hawaii later on. 20 minutes later, she was on the phone. Her eyes went in the back of her head for no reason. She was planning on going home Wednesday, and she went home Wednesday. And the shock to the system of that showed me beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have no idea when tomorrow is going to be it, because one day you're going to be right. Live every day like it's your last, because one day you will be right. And it's still rough. I didn't go to her house for a year. I couldn't bring myself to go in. It was very hard. And that's why I implore you guys and girls, oh, did you see the new the Beatles anthology? They took the Aspinall, and was that Pete Best and on Paul or Aspinall that lit the condom on fire? They sanitized it. I'm surprised, honestly. Disney put on the first anthology. I'm surprised there was smoking and drink. I'm surprised that they did it. But yeah, the the Beatles got a real resurgence in '94 with the anthology. When that came out, a whole new wave of people. And Neil Aspinall, for all his warts, and he was a dead drunk. I mean, Aspinall had a big drinking problem, but he was originally their driver, and he had a kid with Mona Best, Pete Best's mother, and that must have been hard to negotiate. Thinking of, he was a high school kid. Mona Best was probably 15 years older than him. He was dating. I had a kid with her. He's not Pete Best's stepfather, but that's really hard. You know what they did to Pete Best, and you have to be loyal to them. And Pete Best said once to Neil Aspinall, they let me go. They fired me. And Aspinall said, well, they didn't fire me. That's loyalty. And yeah, I think that, well, I know there were a lot of negotiations. I told you that Jack Douglas's step nephew, adopted nephew, godson, whatever he is, he had told me that they fought. Michael, he said they fought. Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, well, I know Mark Lewison, Apple won't deal with Lewison anymore. He lost a lot for some reason with Lewison. But yeah, I think it was Pete Best and McCartney. And the funny thing is, look at that. Thank you, Joe. My most trusted friend. I feel like I'm talking to Luca Brazzi here. Joe, you're always on my side. Rocktober slots. Mike, this kid told, not kid, he's my age. This kid told me that George and Paul were arguing during that anthology. They had a big meeting. George got, first of all, if Jeff Lynne didn't do it, he wasn't doing it. But this was a cash grab. George Harrison was in a lot of trouble financially, or deemed to be. Hey, Dave, in trouble financially. He needed money. He wasn't broke, but he got screwed because of Handmade Films. So what happened was the business partner that he had a contract with him where he assumed none of the risk if the investments went bad, but he got half if it went good. He went into a million things and lost a lot of money for George. What happened was George wanted Jeff Lynne to produce. Paul got Jeff Emmerich. They went 1-for-1. That's why Paul insisted on Emmerich. George didn't like Emmerich. They had a problem, George and Emmerich. Emmerich wrote a book. They got Paul's studio. And George chose the work days. Yes, Handmade Film. Yeah, he didn't want to do the out. He needed the money, and Ringo. I think Ringo begged him. Ringo needed it also, and I think that Ringo asked him, and he's close to Ringo. But what happened was there was a lot of negotiation. This kid told me John Lennon, his widow Yoko, told Jack Douglas this because John was gone already 14, 15 years. Paul walked in the first day with completed lyrics for the part for Free as a Bird that wasn't, and George almost walked out. He said, we're doing this together. You're not writing the lyrics. They said the anthology was very sanitized. It was half the real story. Everyone was afraid of stepping on each other's toes. What happened was, during Now and Then, Paul started getting pushy. George walked out. George apologized to them a day or two later, and that's when they went to George's house and did the short film of the songs and hanging out on his lawn. He invited them over. He felt bad what he did. George stormed out, supposedly. but there was a lot of to and from. Now, the story goes, Mikey, and I tend to believe this. Originally, Yoko found those tapes and asked Elton John, and Elton said no. Supposedly, that was the story, that she had asked Elton John before that, and he said no. And that kind of strained their relationship because Elton is Sean's godfather. Strained the relationship a little. Supposedly, Yoko offered George those tapes way before Paul. And it just so happened Paul went over to that house a couple of days to the Dakota before the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony. That's when she gave the tapes to Paul. One was Nobody Told Me, which was written for Ringo. That song. And I Am the Greatest, wrote that for Ringo as well. And Grow Old With Me. Life Begins at 40, Grow Old With Me. Something was for Ringo also. But the George and Paul didn't get along for a very long time. But then again, this will show you what brothers are. George died in Paul's home out near Beverly Hills. That had to be coordinated. Now, I'm going to give you a story that you're going to love, Mike. I used to coach the assistant chief of D's in New York, Tom Fahey. I used to coach in hockey 2002, 2003. His grandson, his daughter was a nurse. She told me a story that George Harrison was in Staten Island Hospital because they had the new. Yeah, I believe they were, DJ. This is what the kid told me. He was in the maternity ward under George Olivia. And Paul and Ringo rented a house on Toad Hill. And they were there every day for like a week and a half. And that was his cancer treatment when they stopped. He was in Staten Island Hospital. Under George Olivia, they buried him in the maternity ward so people couldn't find him. She knew the nurse that dealt with him. And the nurse said the most touching scene was the last time George was seen by Ringo and Paul. Ringo put his arm around Paul or the other way around. And the nurse was coming out of a room and heard Paul say, "It's goodbye to our friend." This nurse swears that Paul was stroking George's hand and George was stroking Paul's hand. And George said to Paul, "If I get out of this, we'll go back together." That's what he said. She had no reason to lie. That's how much George knew he wasn't getting out of it. And she said there were tears, not a lot of crying, but George is a stoic guy. And she said when Paul started crying, George tapped his hand and said, that's when he started stroking his hand. And he said, "This is life." Because Paul, we've had a full life. And he said, Paul took it very hard, she said, because Paul probably had a lot of guilt, I think. And then they arranged it where he passed at Paul's house near Beverly Hills. So that must have been set up. So as much, isn't it interesting? The person that George had most problems with, he died in his home. There was a story this kid also told me Yeah. Oh, okay. Rocktober. Yeah. Then it's true. I didn't hear that. Um, he also said that they they had a very odd relationship, and Harry Nilsson was Jack Douglas said that one of the Hudson brothers, not Mark, were there in L.A. He let I think the home he hung out, it was Peter Lawford's old home in Malibu. I think that's the on the beach. That's where they he was hanging, and they mentioned to Harry Nilsson about that time. About, well, you were close to John. He goes, no, no, no. He goes, no one was close to John. He goes, those three guys were close to John. He said he could rip Paul apart all he wanted. If you said something about Paul, he'd put you through a window. That's what he said about John. He goes, Paul will just walk out. He's non-confrontational. If someone started to talk, Paul would just walk out. He doesn't want to be confrontational. Yeah, well, George was a kid and he played raunchy on the top deck of the bus. He played raunchy for him, note by note. Yeah, George was a very talented young guitar player. And I know George used to follow Cynthia and John to the movies. They'd go to the movies. He'd be sitting like 2 rows behind them. He was very enamored with George. And I think John always looked at him like a junior partner. I think that's what it was. But Harry Nilsson said that to Jack Douglas, before Nilsson died, said that the Beatles were, in his estimation, close to going back. Now, people don't realize after, I think it was April of 70, the four of them were never in a room together again. Never. In 73, John, George, and Ringo worked on Ringo's album. George was in LA. He was living in LA. He came to the studio and hung out. And John said if Paul was around, we would have invited him. But Harry Nilsson said that John said to Jack Douglas, John said, if we get back together, Harry Nilsson never played a live show. You know that? He never did live shows. He said, you'll open up for us. And he said that John was looking to do it. He also said something very interesting, Mike. He said John all of a sudden was open to working with Paul after he had the #1 hit with Elton John. He was afraid that he had been a failure up until then, and everyone would think that he was latching on to Paul because he needed Paul's help because Paul was coming off #1s. And soon as John had the #1, his ego was nicely intact, and then he was willing to work with Paul. But before that, he was afraid that everyone would say, see, John needs Paul's help. Paul's the real genius. Now, I don't personally think a genius doesn't make a mistake. They had plenty of songs that were fillers. There were plenty of songs that were misses. I think they were a genius together. Genius together. I think that no one would speak up to Paul. John would. Who does Paul have around that that'll say that shit? Nobody. And Paul reined John in a little. No, he was still suing at that point in '88. And George was very upset with it because he said, I've been hanging out with Paul, getting to know him again, and then he doesn't show up at the Hall of Fame. That's what he said. And it's probably right. They were having problems. That's why he didn't go to Bangladesh. He was invited. George invited him. John didn't go because Yoko wasn't invited. And in fact, they had a big fight about that because when he was on the Dark Horse tour, George had a fight, threw John's glasses on the door, said, "You weren't there for me. You were never there for me. I invited you. You know I needed you." And it wasn't about Yoko. It should have been about me. And the next day, he was probably drunk or something. They were staying at I don't know if it was the Warwick in the city. And then George came back the next day, all apologetic. But no, in 1988, George said he still loved McCartney. It was January. They were gone 18 years, and Jagger was the one that put them in. And I think there was still business problems. But yeah, I have the speech in my pocket because I don't have much to say because I'm the quiet Beatle. That's what he said. Paul's not here because he's the one who had the speech in his pocket. So, but he wasn't there to take pot shots at him. He wasn't. And he said that, we all know why John can't be here, and I'm sure he would be. It's hard to be here representing the Beatles, what's left of it. I remember he said that. But they were having business issues. And he hoped they would be settled by then. So he would have felt like a hypocrite waving and smiling with them at a fake reunion. That's what Paul had said. They were still having problems. But George was annoyed because George said, we've been hanging out for 4 years getting to know each other again, and now he doesn't show up. What? Go for the deal for the music? Yoko, yeah. She felt it was too much. And Paul could have bought that music himself. He had the money. Was it 20 million or 40 million or something? Yeah, he lost out on that. He went to Yoko. She thought it was too much. I also think Yoko was probably worried that Paul would start changing the names because around them at that time, Paul said he was going to the songs that he did was going to be McCartney and Lennon. And I think Yoko didn't want to give him the satisfaction of being able to do that. If you think about it, that's probably what it was. But look, you split for a reason, Joe. Originally, he knew Alan Klein was a crook. In fact, I truly believe that Mick Jagger kind of forced Alan Klein off to the Beatles. This way he can get rid of him. I think Jagger started seeing what Alan Klein was. Alan Klein had a great talent. Within 10 minutes, he could tell you your biggest want, and he knew what you were afraid of the most. That was his talent. And if he got what he wanted, he'd bully you. He was going into the Get Back sessions, bullying Paul. And Paul said, no, I'm not doing it. And John Lennon said, Alan has to go to his board. You have to sign this. He wants 15. And he said, Alan doesn't have a board. It's a Friday. I'll talk to you Monday. Well, he has to have it now. He's got to go. Because Alan doesn't have a board. He goes, John, we're a big act. He'll take less than 15%. We're the Beatles. Believe me, he'll take less than 15. And all you want to do is give him everything. So Paul was being a little prudent there. I'm sure that the Eastmans were in Paul's ear, saying at the very least, you could give him a lot less than 15%. The Eastmans probably said, Paul, we would only take 10 or 8. Why do you think Paul knew 15 was too much? Paul knew nothing about business because the agents in his ear, Lee Eastman represented a lot of people in Hollywood. And he probably said, 15%, you're the Beatles. The money you bring in, he'll take 8. He didn't say the Eastmans did it because he knew John had a hard on for the Eastmans, but he went in and said, 15's too much. How do you think Paul knew that? Paul didn't know how much milk cost because the Eastmans told him 15%. You're the Beatles. Someone would take 5% because you're going to make 10 times what anybody else makes on that label. Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I agree with you. In fact, the one who got screwed more than anything in the beginning, George, Brian Epstein wanted to bill them as a band. That's why they had three singers. George got equal singing, if you remember the first album, too. And what happened was Brian Epstein represented the Beatles, and he represented Lennon and McCartney as writers. He had two contracts with the Beatles, one with Lennon and McCartney solo, and with the Beatles. And Lennon and McCartney just thought, Paul asked about George helping. He goes, let's just leave it Lennon and McCartney. But what happened was, a lot of people don't know this. Pete Best, the Beatles, when they signed their contract originally, they were a four-person entity. Pete Best thought that he could sue the other Beatles for breach of contract. What happened was, in that contract stated if any of them were to leave the Beatles, Brian had to represent them as well. That's the only thing that saved. Well, why do you think Pete Best didn't sue the Beatles? Because Brian, in the contract, was he had to represent him. So Brian did represent Pete Best for a short time after the Beatles booted Pete Best out. And he tried to get him work. But he was under contract with Brian Epstein, Pete Best. And it didn't work out very well. In fact, there was a story that Jimmy Nichols, the drummer, he had played in cover bands, which were doing all Beatles stuff. They ran him through about 7 songs. They cut his hair, fit him with suits, and he knew every Beatles song. Big Beatle fan. He was in a cover band. He knew all the songs. And Nichols started getting really to the point where he thought, hey, maybe I'll stay. And George wanted to cancel the tour. George didn't want to go. Brian Epstein told George, we're going to get sued for a fortune. And then George went. But George wanted to cancel the tour without Ringo. And what happened was that's how the song Getting Better was written. When who was the Hunter Davis did the authorized biography on the Beatles in 1966. He was interviewing them all, spending time with them all. I'm wondering if you noticed, Michael, they went to Primrose Hill. And the weather was just getting nicer. It was March. And he said, it's getting better. He goes, Nichols used to say that to John all the time. Because we'd ask him, how's it going? How you doing? Getting better, getting better. And that's how they got the song Getting Better. That was Jimmy Nichols would say that when Lennon would say, how you doing? On the tour that he covered for Ringo. Also, when he was at John's house, they were in the pool and nothing was being said. John's house overlooked like the village. And there were sirens. There was a fire and he heard, woo, 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 woo. And John started writing, I am he as you are he, from the siren. That's how he got the cadence to write that song, I'm the Walrus. That siren, that's what did it. But, the Beatles have a life of their own. For people like, well, Michael's a pro at this. His station's tremendous. Mine's a small little station. But we're big Beatle fans. And Mark Williamson, who does a lot of different shows. Terrific. Very, very, very nice. Matt Williamson, very nice guy. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, there was this guy where he got obla di obla da. There was a friend of his that Paul used to say, "What's it going? Oh, obla di obla da, man." Blah, blah. And the guy sued Paul. He felt that was his saying. Yeah, absolutely right. 8 days a week. Yeah. A hard day's night Ringo came up with that. Yeah, the guy said I work 8 days a week. Yeah. Right on the way to John's house, right? He got out of the cab. And that's how he had the idea. In fact, when Paul was She Loves You, John and Paul loved the front porch, good acoustics. And the father came out and said, you should change it to She Loves You, yes, 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 not yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes in proper English. That's what Paul's father said to him. Why are you using yeah, yeah, yeah? It should be yes, yes, yes. They kept it yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, just so much Beatles stuff. Oh, I loved it. Oh, really? Did he, Rocktober? Um, yeah, there was when Epstein died, the Beatles didn't know where any of their money was. See, you got to remember though, the Beatles originally formed Apple for it was a tax shelter. They were getting killed. Oh, that's okay, Mike. Yeah, obla di obla da. Yeah, yeah. What was that? A Nigerian guy that Paul knew, and Paul would say, "How you doing?" Oh, obla di obla da, man. Like and I think he sued Paul. Well, Paul settled out of court. In fact, Mal Evans helped Paul on some lines. Supposedly on Sergeant Pepper, it was going to be Captain Pepper. It was Salt and Pepper. They were on an airline, and Mal Evans helped, and Paul promised him that he'd help him because we're too hot right now. We can't put Lennon, McCartney, and Evans on it, which he understood, Mal. But he said, "I'll take care of you." And supposedly, he never got any money. But he did on one of the songs. He wrote some lyrics. You could see during the Get Back, Mal Evans, gooey-eyed. It's like he wanted to screw Paul right at the piano. He's staring like this at him. When Paul's writing a song, you could see he's asking Mal, like, "What do you think goes better?" Like Mal was helping him with lyrics. Paul was being helped by Mal. But Mal was oh my God, he was a photo bomb. I think Mal Evans was in more pictures than Ringo was. Mal Evans was in every picture. Oh, really? That Mike, that's very I didn't know that. So that's a very good point. Maybe they just decided to go with it. That's a good point. There were a lot of different, they say they did the mustaches for Sergeant Pepper. Meanwhile, he said he grew the mustache to cover when he had that moped accident where he split his lip, chipped his tooth, and all that. But that was a year later. Yeah, I guess when you think back to all those years ago, it's a long time ago. The timeline gets muddled. Uh, when John wanted to buy an island, John did buy an island, actually. Bought a small island off of Ireland. And they looked at an island off Greece. And they wanted to put a school there and a commune and all that. And there were quail eggs, big quail eggs, and John wouldn't step on them. I don't know if he was with maybe Neil Aspinall. He wouldn't step on them. They took the long way around. It took him like an hour longer walk because he wouldn't step on those quail eggs. Yeah, John walked in the studio and just dun, 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 dun. That's why I think they never knew who was the actual pianist on Hey Bulldog. That's got to be John because that's the same cadence, dun, 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 same as Oblada, Oblada. So I would think about it. It was the same thing. But yeah, John was stoned out of his head and walked in and said, "You still working on the song?" They couldn't get anything going, and he just went and started banging out the beginning on the piano. Yeah. Now, Eleanor Rigby is interesting because a lot of people say it was about Eleanor Braun, who John was kind of fooling around with. But and there was a store with the name Rigby in it near Penny Lane, I think. But there was an Eleanor Rigby in the cemetery. Paul used to practice singing in the cemetery, and there was a tombstone that said Eleanor Rigby. Maybe that was in the back of his head. Yeah, yeah. John was yes, yeah. I think they were arguing a lot. The '80s, they should really talk about. It's funny, Mike, because it seems like soon as George learned meditation, he got more angry at everybody. It's almost like meditation taught George to be who you are and screw everybody else. Because George was very funny. He had a very good sense of humor. But George, there's a British expression that I asked my ex, doesn't suffer fools gladly. The British use that term. It means like you see right through you if you're a phony, and we'll tell you where to go. And I think after meditation, George realized that I'm not here to please everybody. Because George got very ornery after the Beatles. Think about it. George looked he was quiet, but he was happy go lucky in the 60s. George started detracting Sergeant Pepper. Well, Lennon and Harrison weren't around a lot for Sergeant Pepper. Ringo used to sit in the studio 8 hours a day doing nothing. He learned how to play chess. During Sergeant Pepper, Ringo became a really good chess player. And their personalities really changed. I always believed that, and I'm curious what you think of this, Mike. I think that John checked out of the Beatles after Rubber Soul when he started throwing around some authority again. I think they weren't used to it. I think Paul automatically took over the reins. And then when John started taking over a bit again, they were a little uncomfortable with it. But music had changed. Look, Paul, 4 of his best 6 songs over a 3-year period were on the piano. Think about it. Long and Winding Road, Let It Be. Fast forward a couple of years, 2 to 4 years, right? Maybe I'm Amazed, My Love. He a lot of piano ballads. I think McCartney also got better on the piano. John used to play with 3 fingers. If you ever watch him, the middle fingers were always up. John was a very weird player. He was serviceable. John wasn't a great player. He was okay on the electric keyboard. He was okay. He played the electric keyboard, but he was a serviceable pianist. On Imagine, Nicky Hopkins is doing all the little things. Nicky Hopkins was the top studio musician, keyboardist. Everybody used them. Stones used them. Nicky Hopkins is like Ray Cooper for percussion. Ray Cooper's played with everybody, doing this with the cymbals and, but very interesting. But yeah, John was serviceable. He wasn't a great pianist. I don't think he could do much. In fact, Paul surprised himself with Martha, My Dear. But Paul was a lefty. You got to remember, your lead hand would be the right. Paul's is the left. And that's why he sounded so good on Martha, My Dear. I'm not sure, Mike. I know that George Harrison's song, the long one, was Granny Smith. It might have been, it sounds familiar. You might be right there. Now, there are some discrepancies. Mal Evans had said that it was when I find myself in times of trouble, Brother Malcolm comes to me. Mal Evans swore that that was the original and that he was working on that way before he said he had a dream about his mother. Mary is his mother. And Mal Evans said he was working on his song. He called it Brother Malcolm Comes to Me. And then he came in months later saying, I had this Mother Mary. Let it be. My mother always used to say that to me. Let it be, he said. But donning his sights, donning his socks. That's Ringo wrote that. That was Ringo's. You could even tell that Ringo would say something like that. You could tell that's not Paul's donning his socks. Paul doesn't talk like that. Yeah, George. Well, yeah, George bought a house in Switzerland when he was ill because of the taxes. Oh, George. Yeah, George was really very interested in saving money. But then again, he didn't make all that. You got to remember, McCartney and Lennon were making like 30% each or 40% each, whatever it was, 35% each. And the money, when George started getting angry, I think when they stopped touring. George didn't want to tour anymore. But the problem was they weren't making money. Got to remember, they split all the concerts 4 ways, and the manager gets, but they split the concert money. They don't split the album money. The writers get a lot of the album money. They get performance credit. Just like Pete Townsend. Look at what he's worth and look what Roger Daltrey's worth. Pete Townsend gets the writing credit. You make a lot more money with publishing rights. Daltrey gets a performance credit. Now, when you tour, that's where the money is. Look at Dave Matthews Band. Dave Matthews hasn't had a hit song in 35 years. He's worth $350 million. Where do you think that came from? Touring. You make the money with the touring. Happy Thanksgiving, Miss Can't Be Wrong. It's the concerts where you make your money, the touring. And the closeness. When guys are hanging out on tour, you're together. You lose that closeness. You got to remember, when they stopped touring, John lived an hour from London. George lived pretty much in that. They were all family men. They were married. Paul was single. He lived 2 blocks away from Abbey Road in St. John's Wood. He would, go to all the clubs at night. Paul was the man about town. And these guys were just hanging out at their homes. So Paul was really the avant-garde one, if you think about it. John always got the credit. But Paul, I always thought that John's creativity died when he met Yoko. Because John was no longer John. It was John and Yoko. When you spoke to John, you were speaking to Yoko. Yoko was sitting right next to him. And I think that changed John. And I don't understand, you could love your woman and still be in the Beatles. You could do your side projects. And look at Keith Richards was doing side projects with the Wino, the Junko, Winos, whatever he called himself, right? You could still do a Beatle album. And Yoko didn't want him with the Beatles. It's very evident. She didn't want him with the Beatles. I think she was insecure herself. And you take two people, you take one person that needs mothering, called her mother, for God's sakes, and no self-confidence. John Lennon, no self-confidence. And then you got a woman who's stroking you every second. You're the genius here. You're the best. You're the best. You're the best. He wanted to hear that. And plus, they'd grown up. They'd grown up. They weren't 16, 17 anymore. Like John said, it's like, your buddies where you might play pool, you run into them. Hey, how you doing? But it's not your life anymore. And Yoko didn't come from that kind of world. I don't think she was all the blame. I honestly think if Epstein wasn't involved, it would have been different. I think you would have had 4 songs on each. George would have had 4 songs, John, Paul, and they would have wrote one for Ringo or 2. But Alan Klein, in fact, John kind of thought that Linda was a fad. They always thought that he'll dump her, the Eastmans, all the uppity up shit. Paul is very bourgeois now. He wants to learn about Tchaikovsky and all this shit. And then when he gets bored of her, he'll come back to us. That's what I think they felt. I think up until 70, 71. And what happened was he never left her. But I do believe the Beatles in the beginning, I don't think John thought it was over. And because John said so many things, it was a very good chance that after John says, I want a divorce from the Beatles, the next week, let's go do something. John said a lot of things. He said the Beatles were bastards. He said he'd like to redo every song he ever did. They were all shit to George Martin. He told George Martin that when Martin visited him in Dakota, that everything we did was shit. How do you say that? I don't think he'd say that if Yoko wasn't there. Yeah, they were going in a different direction. Oh, they were older. They wanted families. They weren't touring anymore. If they were still touring, he probably would have never met Yoko because he met Yoko in '66 at a John Dunbar gallery, an art gallery. And he met Yoko, and he was very amused by her. They didn't start fooling around for a long time, year and a half. He knew of her. He was interested. She was nuts. She was crazy. She was masculine. Uh, she's someone that would put him in his place a bit. He liked that. He shit all over Cynthia Lennon. She just, whatever he did was fine. Those people have an understanding, on the road, I'm cheating on you, but I'm coming home to you. It's just the road. I'll never talk to them again after that. That's a lot of baseball players have. I know 2 baseball players. I played high school with one of them who was a star. And these baseball players had a girl in every town, or almost every town. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yeah, they had girls in every town. And you don't think the wives knew that? The wives, in Hollywood, you know what's going on. You choose that life. It's like a mob wife. She knows there's a very good chance her husband will go to jail for the rest of his life. Something can happen. She's bought into that, knows his gumad. There's been stories about gumads with mob guys for years. You think your husband's going to be the only one who's hanging in the bar every night? They know. They just don't want to be embarrassed. Just don't do it where I'm embarrassed about it. I know what you're doing. I'll look the other way. They want the money. Same thing with rock stars. I would say I got 80% of rock stars have cheated on their wives. And I'm probably lowballing it. And you got to remember, the '60s were a different time, too. There were drugs involved. There were a lot of drugs involved in the '60s. You got to remember. There were rumors that David Bowie was caught by a maid in bed with Mick Jagger. I believe it. They probably both whacked out of their heads. And then you get older and, you want a family, and that life is not conducive to having a family, and you want to be more conventional. You get older, you're not 25 anymore. But that's the way it is. The '60s, that was an interesting decade. See, I always thought the '70s was an interesting decade. The '70s couldn't make up its mind what it wanted to be, music-wise. It went from elevator rock, elevator music in the early '70s to disco to punk. You had 3 different genres in that decade. Think about it. And the bands in the '60s, a lot of them became solo artists. By the '80s, those bands were lost. They're all in their late 30s, early 40s now, these guys. 16-year-olds don't buy generally 50-year-olds music. I know, Mike. Mike, she was into, do you know the story that she always said, oh the kid, Douglas's nephew told me this. Oh, I gave birth on John's birthday. She self-induced herself. She ran to the hospital, screaming in pain, took some pills that would make them do an emergency delivery. The kid wasn't due for like 6 days. And she made sure it was John's birthday. That was all planned. Also, now Carly Simon was friends with them. and I don't know if it was Carly Simon, but they used to go to Mr. Chow all the time, the Chinese restaurant. And Yoko bought something engraved and said, "Congratulations, it was a girl," and it ended up being a girl like 2 weeks later. That could be, but no, they said she was into voodoo. It must have been amazing, Beatlemania. Really? Well, I think I told this story, Mike. They were in the studio in August. That would make sense because Paul had seen John, and Paul said he'd come down to the studio. And John was talking to David Geffen and said, I thought we're great together. And he said he was going to call me. He doesn't call me. And they got very quiet. The next day he demanded to know. He goes, he calls every day. I'll go and put him through. He went crazy, broke this Gretsch guitar or some guitar he had, smashed it, and said, "You never do that again." He was starting to talk up to Yoko. This kid swears that they were the Rich Burton and Liz Taylor of they were Rich and Liz. They wanted to be the Romeo and Juliet of rock. That their relationship was full of shit. She was screwing around on him. She was doing drugs, and she got him into heroin. She was still doing it in the 80s, in the 70s. I don't think he was. He was just potted out of his head every day, smoked pot out. But yeah, Yoko was very manipulative. And I'll tell you something that a lot of people don't know, Rocktober. Yoko is a very, very good pianist. That Imagine piano, John bought that for her as a gift. That was his gift to her for like 42nd birthday or something. On Fifth Avenue, he bought that. That was her gift. He used that piano for that, but that was her gift. I don't know if it was a 42nd birthday. I forget what birthday it was. But the piano that they used, not the Imagine piano, there was another piano. And yeah, Yoko was an outstanding pianist. Outstanding. And John probably respected her, thought that she knew music and stuff like that. She opened John's, you got to remember, she was exotic to him from a land, right? The New York scene. John loved New York. The New York scene, the village where everything was coming out of, right? Dylan, the poets and all that stuff. John liked that stuff. I know John was always very jealous of Dylan. Up until the day he died, he couldn't get why Dylan was looked at as like the voice of a generation. John said, "I am." He was very jealous of Dylan. Yeah, you're right, Mike. Look, I could talk about them like you can forever. Misspent youth. Probably read 100 books on the Beatles, and I will tell you that it was the perfect storm. It was like your girlfriend breaking up with you and you feeling terrible, and then a model comes over to you and pays you attention. Kennedy was assassinated. Back then, the kids cared about the president. Now they cheer. Back then, they all cried when the president. And what happened was the Beatles made it when the America was in freefall. You had the Bay of Pigs. You had Cuba, and the Beatles came refreshing. They were different. Kids were starting to talk out in the 60s. They weren't sitting hand in hand. Can I leave the table, mother? Now they were starting to get a voice. The 60s had changed. The Vietnam War, it wasn't odd where if you are 9, 10, 12 years of age playing with a kid, that kid's older brother went to war, and it wasn't strange if he never made it back. They grew up very differently than we did. Now, we grew up in the 80s with AIDS. A 22, 23-year-old in the 80s had to grow up. You probably knew someone or heard of someone in shout. I found out that people had passed from AIDS. It was a different decade. The 80s was our 60s. Think about it. The 80s, everything was vibrant, colors, everything in your face, very demonstrative, everything in the 60s. Uh, you had the civil stuff, and in the 80s, you had women's rights. In the 80s, women were finally starting to make money. In the 70s, women were school teachers and secretaries. In the 80s, they were going to law school, they were paralegals, they were nurses. The 80s opened up a lot for women. Like I had said, I thought it was very interesting. In the 80s, a lot of women didn't want a relationship. It actually the tide had turned where they were going to school, they were being professionals. Yeah, I'll go out with you and hang out with you, but I don't want a big relationship. It had changed. Women weren't running to get married anymore in the 80s. They had their own lives, their own money. They were, feeling their oats. The 70s changed, yeah, because you started having two household workers, especially in the 80s, where, juniors getting pizza after football practice, after cheerleading practice. No one sat at the nuclear table anymore. 6 o'clock at night, dinner time, that kitchen, every major decision was made in that kitchen. Every kitchen table had college brochures. That was the place to be. You didn't have that anymore. The nuclear family disbanded, and a lot of the closeness left us because of that. Really, DJ? Yeah, I can imagine. It was a movement. Yeah, it was a movement, and it saved the generation that were afraid that they may not live to see 25 if they got called, or their brother or friend might have died. They had to grow up real fast. The kid that was the 14-year-old, when they get the letter, the telegram that his 18-year-old brother died, that kid is now the older son. And the Beatles gave you a way to escape. That war was, yeah. And you went from the summer of love, and in 1 year, show me a year. Hey, Royce, show me a year where everything went from the hippies were the heroes in this 67 summer of love, and in 68 they were looked at as bums and hippies. Think of that. In 1967, the summer of love, everybody, come 68, lazy bums and hippies. Filthy. That's the way it was. It changed a lot. Our perception changed. The media. You're pretzel legged at 9 o'clock, at 9 years of age, and you see bodies on stretchers on television. You can't totally comprehend what that is. And it's very scary. That generation really. Hey, Denise, how are you? I'm very sorry that you are without. God bless you, Denise. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I'm very sorry that you're not with your husband. Shout out to Denise. Good thoughts for her, everybody. Yeah, we were talking about that before I got on my Beatle tangent an hour ago. Yeah, we have to be thankful. And I hope you have a good day, Denise. And I'm a certified life and health coach. And lovethehits@gmail.com. I'm going to put it in here. I do that for a living now. I'm a retired stockbroker. I worked in England in 1991. And I became certified. And that's my email. I'm putting it up there. Obviously, there's no charge for my wonderful friends in here. I would never charge you guys. If you need me anytime, hit me up and I'll give you my number. Please, I mean that. Email me. I'll give you my number if you need me. I don't care what time it is. You could ask Mitch. 2 a.m. Wake me up. I don't give a shit. We're all in this together. It's hard to be happy. And if I could get your mind for 2 seconds in a phone call or 10 minutes, hopefully, off your pain, I'm there for you. Anybody. They own the 60s, but there comes a big price with that. That means that because they were so far ahead of the curve with everything, they had to be trendsetters. And I think they worried that they couldn't be in the 70s. Things were changing so much. Think about it. 71, you had Led Zeppelin. You had bands that were really starting to become powerhouses. And, well, I always thought the first album really of the 70s was Abbey Road. I always thought that started the 70s off. I did. And there was no reason to think that the Beatles, if you had songs like, Imagine, Junior's Farm, radio friendly for public consumption, those songs, and it's just the Beatles, people come out with, the Beatles, yeah, let's go buy it. Even give a shit. After a while, if they didn't put anything out there good, you say, it's not so good. And you got to remember too, the Beatles, they lost a lot of fans come 67, 68 when they got artsy and a little radical revolution. They had to start talking about the Vietnam War because they were always asked, and Lennon wasn't shutting up now. And Brian Epstein was gone. If you notice, when Brian Epstein died, they got a little more boisterous. I don't know if John Lennon is doing the song Revolution if Brian Epstein's there. Epstein was able to reel John in. There was no one to reel John in anymore. And then with Yoko involved, no one was rolling. No one was reeling him in. He felt, hey, I have something to say. They were always asked, and he said it. He said, how could you ignore it? Yeah, the Sgt. Pepper's was a great album. It was an art album. It was really the first art album. Rubber Soul was the pot album. Revolver was the acid album. And the conceptual art album was Rubber Soul. It started off to be an album about their heritage. Penny Lane, they were going to do Strawberry Fields. The first 2 songs were in the concept of that album. And then it just fell apart. The album happened to flow, but that was supposed to be all about England, that album. Think about it, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. They were going to talk about each part of England that was part of their life, and then it just all fell apart. The album was great, but it wasn't the album that they had envisioned. McCartney envisioned an art album about where they're from, and that was it. Jumpin' Jack Flash, yeah, well, that was great. Yeah, the Beatles were going through in 66. They weren't selling out everywhere anymore, but you couldn't hear it. Prices became high back then. They started the open air stadium, right? Shea Stadium was the first one. But the Stones are great live. The Stones I always thought are hit and miss live. I've seen the Stones within a couple of year period. They were great one night, and then the other night they're all right. Stones were more hit and miss. You could catch them on a great night. There are other nights that were okay. But I'm going to let you guys go. No homework tonight. Please check out. I dropped your Royce earlier, your link, and Mike as well. Please, anybody that watches this on, which I don't get a lot of views, but check them out. They're fine men. And if you want to really You know, when you say you meet good people in life and it helps you, well, meeting good people that become your friends on YouTube is the same thing. Go meet them. Go in and say hi because believe me, they've enriched my life and they will enrich yours. God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving. Denise, I'm dead serious. Hit me. Oh, Royce, thank you so much. My God. Thank you so much, Royce. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Royce is in the house, the Four Horsemen. And check them out because they are terrific. Denise, I mean it. If you need me, please email me. I'll give you my number. And that goes for all of you. I'm not saying I could save you, but I could be an ear that's a fresh ear because you've said it to other people and maybe you don't like them saying, oh, really enough. It'll never be enough with me. I'll be there for you. God bless you all. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be safe. Don't get so mad at Uncle Joe who says the same story. Shock him, right, Joe? See you soon.